BMW 5 Series G30, 2 liters B47D20B. In the G30 generation, the 5 was equipped with 4 and 6-cylinder turbo diesels B47 and B57, respectively. The younger B47 is twin-turbo in the pre-restyling version 525D, as well as in the restyled version 520D, 3 liters B57D30B. The 3-liter diesel is called B57. It comes with 1 turbo, 2 in the 540D version, and even 4 turbochargers in the M550D version. This engine produces 394 horsepower. Produced before restyling, until 2020. All these engines suffer from the intake manifold. The bushings that are located between the intake channels wear out. These bushings are supports for the axis of the swirl flaps. Firstly, these intake manifolds are not dismountable. A separate frame with flaps and axle simply does not exist. Secondly, these collectors are restored because the jumper bushings themselves are simply pressed into the manifold itself. If you work hard, you can pick them out and replace them with something similar. Thirdly, in addition to wear of the internal hole of the axle support, the supports can break into pieces. These fragments will fly towards the combustion chambers. So far there have been no cases of damage to the CPG by this plastic. The terrible knocking and clanging of a running B47 or B57 engine is usually caused by vibration of the steel axis of the dampers. A new intake manifold for 4, 11,618,513,655, and 6-cylinder, 11,618,477,030, the Series diesel engines cost $1,500 to $2,000. But, as noted, there are options for restoring them. There are also even substitute analogs for $400 to $600, and, of course, every 150,000 kilometers the intake manifold of these diesel engines becomes densely covered with soot. And in general the entire intake tract from the EGR valve to the valves in the cylinder head are cleaned with nut shells. Another point is that the B47 and E57 engines continued to catch fire. The same soot of the intake manifold is burning, but soaked in antifreeze. And here again the EGR valve is to blame for Bavarian engines. Recall campaigns have been and are being carried out on this issue. The ECU is being reflashed, and the condition of the intake manifold and EGR valve is being checked. For B47-4s, the leaking EGR cooler was replaced, as well as the intake manifold if it does not pass testing. For B57-6s, at a minimum the condition and tightness of the EGR cooler is checked. In case of poor condition, it is also replaced with a new one. In 4-cylinder versions, the wiring in the harness is stretched from the ECU to the engine may fray. The AdBlue system of G30 diesel 5s may require replacing the entire tank in the mileage range from 100 to 150,000 km. Errors in the system occur as a rule due to the failure of the urea level sensor and temperature sensor. In this case, you will have to change the active AdBlue tank. A new one costs about $1,000 or even more. 16,197,391,919. You can also find a used ear tank. By the way, if an error occurs with AdBlue injection and the system is turned off, then the car gives you 500 kilometers to drive on dirty exhaust. Then the car won't even start. In general, this happens with literally any car with urea injection. In addition, errors in the urea injection system on the G35 can be caused by chafing of the wiring. Check the wires to the tank behind the rear right wheel locker. Sometimes flashing the SCR block, ecology block, with new firmware helps. It is said that if you keep the amount of urea in the tank above half, the electronic components of the tank will last much longer. In addition, the AdBlue liquid itself must be of high quality. By the way, the original urea in a 1.9-liter canister with the BMW logo costs about $10. 83,190,441,139. It's sad that after replacing an expensive active AdBlue tank, problems with it can appear in just a year. But the entire system can be repaired. Naturally, the G30 diesel 5s have particulate filters. According to the experience of owners, they last about 250,000 kilometers and more if the car mainly runs on highways. The timing chains 13,528,490,224, 11,318,570,649. For the B47 and B57 engines are practically the same as those of their predecessor engines with the N index. They last about 250,000 kilometers. Torsional vibration dampers in the front crankshaft pulley, i.e. pulleys for the attachment belt, are expensive. They have to be replaced after a mileage of about 200,000 kilometers. It has also been noted that the support cushions for diesel engines 2211-6-878-247, 2211-6-860-477, last about 150 to 200,000 km crack and burst. New original supports cost about $120. 2.0 B48 B20, the B Series gasoline engines turned out to be decent. The Turbo 4s and Turbo 6s B48 and B58 turned out to be very successful and mechanically strong and durable. The 2-liter engine is now found under the hood of the 530i and almost all hybrid versions. Inline 6 for the 540th. In 2020, these engines underwent a deep technical restyling. If you look at the catalogs, the B48 and B58 motors are designated B48C and B58C, as well as B48D and B58D. Changes affected the timing drive. Instead of 2 chains, 13,528,648,731, 11,318,648,729, 1 long one, 11,318,631,842, was used. Bono's phase shifters are completely different. The cylinder head is also different. The exhaust manifold is integrated into the cylinder head of the modernized versions. The cooling circuits of the cylinder block and cylinder head are separated. In addition, the crankshafts and cylinder blocks were slightly lighter. The B48 and B58 engines of the first and second generations can be recognized by their decorative covers. The twin-power turbo inscriptions on them are located, respectively, along the axis of the car or across it. The problem with these engines is the cooling system. Yes, radiators definitely need to be washed almost every year. But that's not really what this is about. Already somewhere around 120,000 kilometers, at each oil change you need to carefully inspect the oil filter cup. They are entirely plastic. The pump for all variations of the B48 Turbo 4 is mechanical, driven by an attachment belt. For the first generation motor, the pump is equipped with a shutoff mechanism with an external actuator, 1151-8638-026. On the inside, next to the composite impeller, there is a rotary valve flap that cuts off the flow of antifreeze. The updated B48 and B58 have the same pumps and cannot be switched off. 11,518,482,251. By 150,000 kilometers, traces of antifreeze appear on the pump brackets, which indicates the need to replace the pumps. All versions of the B48 and B58 engines have plastic oil filter cups. 11,428,596,283, 11,428,488,578, 11,428,583,895, 11,428,488,578, with heat exchangers screwed to them. With runs of 100 to 150,000 kilometers in these glasses, the partition of the antifreeze supply channel, which holds its gasket, bursts. In this case, the antifreeze leaks out very quickly. It's good that it doesn't get into the oil channels. It's up to you to change the glass preventively or after the fact. The original one costs under $500. By 100,000 kilometers, it is worth replacing the cap of the main expansion tank, 17,117,639,020. Sometimes the expansion tank itself, 17,139,884,859, which has already survived 3 revisions, bursts. The small expansion tank also has an improved version, 17,139,485,733. In general, all pipes and hoses of the cooling system for gasoline G30s require special attention. Experience shows that just because of one burst pipe you may need a tow truck. Particular attention to the smallest pipes, from the radiator to the expansion tank, 17,128,602,599, especially since there is an improved version of it, 17125A09423. An improved hose from the cylinder head to the small expansion tank, 17,129,844,478, and a small tube from it to the cylinder head, 17,128,632,260, were also proposed. There is also a connecting pipe under the intake manifold, 11,11,8,500,11,205, from under which antifreeze oozes. On the front of the engine, at the level with the crankshaft oil seal on the driver's side, there is a plug, 11,11,797,932, from under which antifreeze also begins to ooze. 3.0 B58 B30, 540 at 340 horsepower, 545e plug-in hybrid 394 horsepower. All of the above is also true for the B58 engine. With the exception of the cooling system pump, the first generation motor has an electric main pump. In addition to it, there are a couple of small auxiliary pumps. The The B58 Turbo 6s for the G35 come with one twin-scroll turbocharger. In the first generation it is a Bosch Mali product, 11,659,423,787, and after the update it is KKK 11,658,679,021. This motor is very reliable. He and his younger brother are not inclined to eat butter. You can kill it due to problems with the cooling system. Other common troubles that arise after 150,000 kilometers are oil leaks from under the valve cover, a cracked pipe of the VKG system, 11,157,637,521. It's still rare, but problems with Vano solenoids occur on runs up to 100,000 kilometers. The Valvetronic servo motor runs more than 150,000 kilometers before problems occur. And under no circumstances skimp on the oil filter. Cheap filters are crushed, deformed and torn to pieces in B48 and B58 engines. 4.4 V8 N6323, M550i 462 horsepower and 63 B44C, M550i 530 horsepower, and 63 B44D. 4.4 V8 S6323, M5 600 horsepower S63B44B, M5 Competition 625 horsepower S63B44B. At the top of the powertrains is the N63 unit, now in its fourth generation. This engine is considered to be quite reliable, but during urban use many problems arise with it. The oil glutton and the accompanying degradation of the oil kill it. But highway and even racing operation with an oil change every 7,500 kilometers or even more often allows the mighty twin turbo 8 to travel more than 300,000 kilometers without a hint of oil consumption and wear. Before the restyling, there was a limited supply of hybrids in the G35 model range. After restyling, 5 variations of plug-in hybrids appeared in both body types. The 545e version appeared. And all formerly non-hybrid models with 4 and 6-cylinder engines have in fact become mild hybrid. They now have a separate electrical network with a voltage of 48 volts. The main battery is lithium-ion, small capacity. Mild hybrids do not have a separate electric motor. The 48-volt network includes a generator, which, through an attachment belt, pushes the crankshaft, reducing fuel consumption. Hybrid versions, with the letter E in the model designation, are equipped with an electric motor mounted near the flywheel. They have a traction battery of approximately 10 kilowatt-hours. Its energy is enough to leisurely drive about 30 or 50 kilometers without turning on the internal combustion engine. If we talk about reliability, then so far all these types of hybrids themselves do not raise questions. ZF8 HP51Z, almost all G30/G31.5s are equipped with 8-speed automatically. This is a ZF transmission. She is very reliable and tenacious. For European users, without replacing the ATF, it lasts more than 300,000 kilometers. If you carry out a partial oil change at least once every 100,000 kilometers, then 500,000 will pass. During a partial oil change, about 6 to 7 liters are drained/filled, 83,222,289,720. Filter, 24,347,544,931, is built into its plastic tray. This part costs about $150 to $180. It'd be a good idea to change the pan every 100,000 kilometers. Unfortunately, at such an interval it begins to leak oil around its perimeter. Let's start with the fact that the suspension of the G35 performed well. However, under warranty these cars often had all the drives, both rear and front, for all-wheel drive cars, changed during the runs. Be sure to inspect the drive boots every time you change engine oil. They often tear. Then dirt and moisture finish off the CV joints. Often the steering rack was changed. Its bearing on the right side begins to play and makes a crunching and knocking noise, which can be confused with the grinding of brake pads or the knocking of stabilizer links. This problem has long been known in specialized steering rack repair shops. It can be solved by inexpensive repairs and replacement of the bearing. There are cases when replacing steering rods unqualified, craftsmen do not secure their anthers well. Moisture gets under them, which affects the rack itself and its body, and can drown its electric motor. The 5G30 comes with air suspension. An annoying weak point has already been identified. The wires to the compressor are broken in the area under the rear left fender liner. An error appears caused by a loss of communication with the compressor. This trouble can be eliminated very simply by soldering the wire to eliminate the break. The rear elastic coupling of the propeller shaft is actually a consumable. The original one lasts about 100,000 kilometers until the first cracks. A new one costs about $250, $26,117,610,372. Substitutes $40, $80. The front clutch lasts almost twice as long. Its price is up to $200, $26,111,229,360. The silent blocks of the rear gearbox last longer than on the 5F10. But when replacing the elastic hard end coupling, they need to be carefully inspected, especially the only rear silent block, 3331-6868-535. The front gearbox silent blocks last longer. After 150,000 kilometers, fogging may appear on the gearbox seals. You can change the oil in the rear gearbox. A branded bottle with a volume of 0.5 liters will cost $70. $83,222,413,512. You need to buy 2 of them, because 800 grams of oil are placed in the gearbox. Oil for the front gearbox of all-wheel drive versions costs the same, but its grade is slightly different. 8322-413-511. One 0.5-liter jar is enough. Transfer case oil is a little cheaper, about $50 per 1 liter, $83,222,409,710. Often, after changing the tires, G35s begin to vibrate the wheels for no apparent reason. The vibration is either constant on some wheels, or is felt when braking. Do you know what the problem is? Corrosion of the mating surfaces of brake discs and wheel rims. Sometimes mutual cleaning of these surfaces helps, sometimes this can only make things worse. But then Bavarian engineers came to the rescue. They suggested thin disc spacers. 34,106,884,839 that need to be placed between the brake and wheel discs. They smooth out irregularities and vibration disappears. The cost of such gaskets is $35 each. Let's talk about suspension arms. When used on European roads, their silent blocks and ball parts last more than 200,000 kilometers. If the G35 was purchased new from our dealers, then the first play and squeaks from the levers appeared at 120,000 kilometers. Prices for the front suspension arms are as follows. Rear lower, $31,10,6,861,181, $300. Front lower, $31,10,6,861,166, $150. The choice of analogs is wide, from $50 to $150, depending on the place of production, China or Europe. Silent blocks are not available separately for sale yet. Original front stabilizer links cost from $8 for Chinese ones to $50 for the original, $31,36,861,485. The rear suspension shock absorbers turned out to be rather weak. They often leak profusely after a mileage of 150,000 kilometers. Original passive ones cost about $250 a piece. Replacements cost from $150 to $230. The lowest silent block in the rear suspension is one of the first to wear out. According to the original, it is not detailed, it is sold only with a trunnion, and not with a lever. The only analog of this silent block costs about $6. All rear suspension arms have analogs of any quality costing from $60 to $200. Original rear suspension arms cost $250 to $300 for one, and there are 5 of them for each wheel. Although the camber linkage, 3332-6875-104, does not have its own silent blocks, the headlights of the G35 sometimes sweat. This also applies to top-end laser headlights, which are widely found on restyled cars. Fortunately, fogging is very light. The electronics are not affected. It is not uncommon for pre-restyling cars to have their signature angel eyes dim or go dark. The reason is that one of the LEDs has burned out. In this case, the LED can melt the light guide, i.e. scattering element. Fortunately, the creators of the headlights figured out to move the eye illumination unit outside the headlight housing. It can be purchased separately. The original module for one headlight costs from $200 to $270. $63,117,214,939. There are even several cheaper analogs. This is a common problem. Also, some craftsmen solder in a new LED instead of a burnt one. But, as a rule, the substitute does not shine so brightly. If the 5G30 is equipped with door closers, then in winter the door handles and locks must be thoroughly blown out after washing before leaving in the cold. The servo cables of the door closers, 51,217,480,739, 51,227,480,741, are weak and easily break if frost prevents them from retracting freely. In addition, The rear door locking cables easily freeze after this. The outer door handles, as they say, cannot be torn off. They don't pull back. This usually happens on cars with mileage of more than 100 to 150,000 km, since moisture gets under the cracked cable sheath. Original rear door handle cables cost about $35, 51225A077A2 and 51225A077A1. The rear window wiper of the 5 Touring G31 sticks after opening it. You understood everything correctly. The rear window of the station wagon swings up separately from the door. All BMW fans know this. After opening and closing the window, the wiper sometimes stops working. This is a drawback of this design. When opening the glass, the wiper axis is disconnected from the servo drive, and when closing, the steel control button located next to the axis simply does not fit into its hole. If the wiper does not work, then simply swing it up and down near the axis until it clicks, the contact closes. Or place something like a piece of cardboard under the button seal, which will remove its play. This is the kind of collective farm work we have to do on 6 to 4-year-old G31 touring cars. The 5 G30 has louvers in the nostrils and, depending on the engine, in the air intake in the bumper. These blinds have not surprised anyone for a long time. They close to improve aerodynamics and open when the radiators need airflow. These blinds are very capricious. They were often replaced under warranty, changed and replaced according to the coolants. They do not like frost and dirt. The motors in them die. The motor for the bumper air intake shutters is sold only together with them. For this unit you will have to pay about $230. $51,137,497,285. The nostril blind servo motor is sold separately for about $80. $51,749,854,640. The components of the blinds last about 3 years. They are finished off with salt and road reagents. In general, after the winter season, blinds should be cleaned and lubricated. Let us add that the failure of the lower blinds occurs unnoticed, without the appearance of the check engine indicator. The error will be detected by computer diagnostics. A problem with the lower blinds is indicated by the illogical operation of the upper ones. They will open immediately after the central lock is unlocked. Normally, they open as the engine warms up.